My name is Sarah. I'm 28 years old, and the day I found out my own grandma betrayed me for the woman who destroyed our family, my heart broke in a way I never thought possible. The woman who raised me, who held me when I cried, who promised she'd always protect me. She chose my father's mistress over me. She chose the woman who tore our family apart over her own granddaughter. I'm sitting here now, my hands still shaking as I tell you this story, because I need you to understand something. I need you to understand that betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it comes wrapped in familiar hugs, spoken in voices you've trusted your whole life, delivered by hands that once wiped your tears. Before I tell you what really happened, make sure you like this video, subscribe, and comment below where you're watching from, because this story will make you rethink everything about family and loyalty. It will make you question every person you think you can trust, every relationship you think is unbreakable. Because I thought the same thing about my grandmother, and look where that got me. Growing up, Grandma was my safe place. She was everything to me when the world felt like it was crumbling around me. My mother, my mother was broken, completely shattered by what my father did to our family. She couldn't get out of bed most days, couldn't even look at me without seeing his face. So Grandma stepped in. She raised me when my mother couldn't. She was my best friend, my teacher, my whole world. I remember being 7 years old, standing in Grandma's kitchen while she made pancakes on Sunday mornings, the smell of vanilla and cinnamon filling the air, her humming old songs while she flipped them perfectly golden. She'd tell me stories about her childhood, about how strong women in our family always survived everything life threw at them. She'd brush my hair and tell me I was special, that I was her little fighter, that no matter what happened in this world, she would always be on my side. You and me against the world, little bird, she used to say. That was her nickname for me, Little Bird, because she said I was always trying to spread my wings and fly away from the pain. She said she'd always be my safe branch to land on. God, how naive I was to believe that. When my parents' marriage fell apart, I was 12. My father had been having an affair with his secretary, Rebecca, a woman 20 years younger than my mother, with blonde hair and a smile that could fool anyone into thinking she was innocent. But she wasn't innocent. She was calculating, manipulative, and she knew exactly what she was doing when she set her sights on my father. The divorce was ugly, screaming matches that echoed through our house at all hours. My mother throwing things, my father yelling back, and me hiding in my room with my hands over my ears, praying for it to stop. But through it all, Grandma was there. She'd pick me up on the worst nights and take me to her house, where it was quiet and safe, where I could pretend my family wasn't falling apart. Don't you worry about any of this, she'd tell me, holding me while I cried. Adults make mistakes, but that doesn't change how much you're loved. Your grandmother will always love you, no matter what. Those words, they kept me alive during the darkest times. When my mother finally had her breakdown and had to be hospitalized, when my father moved in with Rebecca and started a new life like we never existed, Grandma's words were all I had to hold on to. She fought for custody of me, fought tooth and nail against my father and that woman who wanted me out of the picture completely. Rebecca didn't want any reminders of my father's previous life, and I was the biggest reminder of all. But Grandma won. She took me in, legally adopted me, and for 6 years, I thought I finally had the stability I'd been desperately searching for. I was wrong, but everything started to change the day that woman came into our lives again. I was 18, just graduated high school, getting ready to start college. I thought the worst was behind us. I thought Rebecca was just a terrible memory from my childhood, someone who had caused pain but was no longer relevant to our lives. Then my father got sick. Cancer, stage 4. The doctors said he had maybe 6 months to live, and suddenly, Rebecca was calling our house. At first, it was just to let Grandma know about his condition. "He's asking for Sarah," she'd say in that sickeningly sweet voice I remembered hating as a child. "He wants to make things right before it's too late." Grandma would hang up and look at me with such pain in her eyes. "What do you want to do, little bird?" she'd ask. "I'll support whatever decision you make." I didn't want to see him. I didn't want to forgive him. This man had abandoned me, had chosen his new life over his daughter, had let that woman push me out of his world completely. Why should I care that he was dying? Why should I give him the comfort of my forgiveness when he'd never once fought for me after the divorce? But Grandma, she started pushing gently. "Maybe it would be good for you," she'd say. "Maybe you need closure. Maybe this is your chance to heal that wound in your heart." I trusted her. I trusted her judgment, her wisdom, her love for me. So, against every instinct in my body, I agreed to see him. The first visit was awkward and painful. My father looked like a shell of the man I remembered. Thin, gray, weak. Rebecca hovered around him like some kind of protective angel, and I wanted to scream at the sight of her. But I sat there, I listened to his apologies, and I tried to find some peace in his words. "I'm sorry, Sarah," he kept saying. "I'm so sorry for everything. I was a coward. I was selfish. I should have fought harder to keep you in my life. But you know what?" His apologies felt hollow. They felt like something he was saying because he was dying and wanted to clear his conscience, not because he actually understood the depth of what he'd done to me. Still, I kept going back, week after week, sitting in his sterile living room, listening to him try to rebuild a relationship that he had destroyed years ago. And through it all, Grandma was there, supporting me, driving me to the visits when I was too emotional to drive myself, holding me when I came home crying because it was all too much. She was my rock, just like she'd always been. But I started noticing changes in her. Small things at first. She'd spend longer on the phone with Rebecca, planning my father's care. She'd defend Rebecca when I'd make comments about her. "She's taking good care of him," Grandma would say. "She really loves him, you know. She's been devoted to him all these years." Devoted? This woman who broke up my parents' marriage was devoted? I couldn't understand why Grandma was speaking about her with such respect, such warmth. Then the visits started getting longer. Grandma would drop me off at my father's house, and she'd stay. She'd sit in the kitchen with Rebecca, drinking coffee and talking for hours while I spent uncomfortable time with my dying father. When I'd ask her about it later, she'd just say they were discussing his care, his needs, practical things. I should have paid more attention. I should have listened to that voice in my head that was screaming something was wrong. But I was so focused on my own pain, my own struggle to forgive this man who had hurt me so deeply, that I missed what was happening right in front of my eyes. My father died on a Tuesday morning in October. I wasn't there when it happened. I was at college, sitting in my psychology class, when Grandma called to tell me. Rebecca had called her first. Rebecca had been holding his hand when he passed away. Rebecca had been his final comfort, not me, not his daughter. I felt relief, and then I felt guilty for feeling relief. But mostly, I felt free. Free from the obligation to forgive him. Free from the weekly visits that reopened old wounds. free from pretending that a few months of apologies could erase 18 years of abandonment. The funeral was small. My mother came, looking fragile but stable. She'd been doing better since starting therapy, but seeing my father's casket brought back so much pain for her. Grandma held my hand during the service while Rebecca sat in the front row, playing the grieving widow, even though they'd never actually married. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought Rebecca would disappear from our lives again, and Grandma and I could go back to our quiet, peaceful existence together. I was planning to transfer to a college closer to home so I could spend more time with her. At 75, she was getting older, and I wanted to take care of her the way she'd taken care of me. But Rebecca didn't disappear. 2 weeks after the funeral, she came to our house, just showed up at the door with a casserole and that same sweet smile, asking how we were doing, saying she wanted to make sure we were okay. Grandma invited her in, actually invited her into our home, the home where I'd found safety and healing after this woman had destroyed my family. I was furious. I pulled Grandma aside and asked her what she was thinking. "She's grieving too," Grandma said. "She loved your father. She's been alone in that big house, dealing with all the aftermath of his death. It's just one visit, little bird. Just being kind." But it wasn't just one visit. Rebecca started coming over regularly. Every few days, she'd show up with food or flowers or some excuse to see how we were doing. And Grandma welcomed her every single time. She'd make tea, they'd sit in the living room for hours, talking and laughing like old friends. Laughing. This woman who had torn my family apart was laughing in my grandmother's living room, and my grandmother was laughing with her. I started noticing how Grandma treated me differently when Rebecca was around. Cold stares when I'd make comments about needing to get back to studying. Silence when I'd try to join their conversations. And words that cut deeper than any knife. "Sarah's been having a hard time adjusting," I heard her tell Rebecca one afternoon when they thought I was upstairs. "She's always been a bit dramatic, very emotional. She holds on to grudges longer than she should." Dramatic? I was dramatic for having feelings about the woman who destroyed my family? I was holding a grudge by being uncomfortable with my grandmother befriending my father's mistress. I confronted her that night after Rebecca left. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "Why are you letting her into our lives, into our home? You know what she did to our family." Grandma's face went cold, colder than I'd ever seen it. "What she did," she said. "Sarah, you need to grow up. Your father's marriage to your mother was over long before Rebecca came along. She didn't destroy anything that wasn't already broken." Those words hit me like a physical blow. My grandmother, the woman who had held me while I cried about my father's betrayal, was now defending the woman who had helped him betray us. "But what about Mom?" I asked. "What about what this did to her? What it did to me?" "Your mother was a weak woman who couldn't keep her husband happy," she said, and I swear to you, the venom in her voice made me step back. "And you're becoming just like her, bitter, unable to move on, unable to forgive." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't my grandmother talking. This wasn't the woman who had raised me, who had fought for me, who had promised to always be on my side. The visits continued. Rebecca's presence in our house became normal, expected. She'd bring groceries and cook dinner for us. She'd help Grandma with household tasks. She'd sit in my father's old chair at the dinner table like she belonged there. And I started feeling like a stranger in my own home. The home where I'd felt safe and loved for 6 years suddenly felt hostile and unwelcoming. Grandma would criticize me constantly now: my clothes, my attitude, my inability to be civil to Rebecca. She'd make comments about how I was too old to be acting like a spoiled child, and how I needed to learn some gratitude for everything Rebecca was doing for us. Gratitude? For what? For inserting herself into our lives again? For making me relive the trauma of my childhood every single day? But the worst part wasn't even Rebecca being there. The worst part was watching my grandmother transform into someone I didn't recognize, someone cold and critical and dismissive of my feelings, someone who seemed to care more about this outsider's comfort than her own granddaughter's pain. I started staying at college longer, coming home less frequently. When I was there, I'd stay in my room, avoiding the common areas where Rebecca had made herself comfortable. But even that became a source of conflict. "You're being rude," Grandma would say. "Rebecca asks about you. She cares about you, and you won't even say hello to her properly." Cares about me? This woman who had wanted me erased from my father's life cared about me. But I tried. God help me, I tried. Because I loved my grandmother more than anything in this world, and I couldn't bear the thought of losing her too. So I started being civil to Rebecca. I'd say hello when she came over. I'd answer her questions about school. I'd sit at the dinner table when she cooked for us, choking down food that tasted like betrayal. And you know what Rebecca did with my civility? She used it against me. She started making comments about how mature I was being, how proud she was of me for working through my anger. She'd tell stories about my father, about how he'd always worried about me, about how he'd wanted us to be one big family before he died. One big family. With her as what? My stepmother? The woman who had helped destroy my actual family now wanted to be part of a new one. But Grandma ate it up. Every word, every gesture, every manipulation. She'd nod along when Rebecca talked about my father's dreams for our family. She'd agree when Rebecca suggested I might benefit from letting go of the past and embracing new possibilities. I felt like I was losing my mind. The woman who had raised me to be strong and independent was now encouraging me to accept the presence of someone who had caused me immense pain. The woman who had once promised me that family was about loyalty and love was now prioritizing a stranger's feelings over mine. But I didn't know how bad it really was until the night I came home early from college. I'd been feeling sick all day, some kind of stomach bug, so I'd skipped my evening classes and driven home to rest. I had my own key, obviously, so I let myself in quietly, not wanting to wake Grandma if she was already asleep. But she wasn't asleep. She was in the kitchen with Rebecca, and they were talking, really talking, the kind of deep, intimate conversation you have with someone you trust completely. I stood in the hallway, hidden by shadows, and listened to my grandmother destroy everything I thought I knew about my life. "I never liked that girl," Rebecca was saying. "Even when she was little, she had this attitude, this entitled way about her, like the world owed her something. And my grandmother laughed, actually laughed. "I know exactly what you mean," she said. "I tried to raise her right, but some of that comes from her mother's side. The dramatics, the victim mentality. It's exhausting." Victim mentality? For being hurt that my father abandoned me? For struggling with my parents' divorce? For being uncomfortable with my father's mistress inserting herself into my life? "I think she needs tough love," Rebecca continued. "She's been coddled too much, made to feel like her feelings are more important than everyone else's." "You're absolutely right," Grandma agreed. "I've been too soft with her, making excuses for her behavior instead of demanding better. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought they might hear it. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be my grandmother talking about me this way. But it got worse. The truth is, Grandma said, and her voice dropped lower, more conspiratorial. I think it might be better if she learned to be more independent. She's 19 years old. She should be figuring out her own life instead of clinging to me like some kind of security blanket. Maybe it's time for some boundaries, Rebecca suggested. Some natural consequences for her attitude. What do you mean? Well, you've been supporting her college expenses, right? Maybe it's time she learned to support herself. Got a job, took out student loans like other kids her age. It might teach her some responsibility. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. They were talking about cutting off my financial support for college, the support that Grandma had promised me, that she'd been providing for over a year, the support that was allowing me to get an education and build a future for myself. I've been thinking the same thing, Grandma said. She needs to learn that everything in life isn't just handed to you, that you have to work for what you want. But I had been working. I had a part-time job on campus. I was maintaining a 3.8 GPA while dealing with the emotional trauma of my father's death and Rebecca's constant presence in my life. I was doing everything I could to build a stable future for myself. Plus, Rebecca continued, it would give you more freedom, more time to focus on your own needs instead of constantly worrying about her moods and her problems. You're right, Grandma said. I've spent so many years putting her needs first that I've forgotten what it's like to just live for myself. Putting my needs first? Is that what she called raising me when my parents couldn't? Is that what she called providing me with love and stability when my world was falling apart? I backed away from the kitchen slowly, my whole body shaking. I made it to my room and closed the door as quietly as possible, then collapsed on my bed and tried to process what I just heard. My grandmother, the woman who had saved me, who had been my everything for 6 years, was planning to abandon me. She was choosing Rebecca over me. She was choosing her new friendship with my father's mistress over her relationship with her own granddaughter. And the way she talked about me, like I was a burden, like I was some spoiled, entitled child who had been taking advantage of her kindness, like everything she'd done for me had been a sacrifice instead of love. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out how I'd gotten here, how the person I trusted most in the world had turned into someone I didn't recognize, how the woman who had once called me her little bird was now talking about pushing me out of the nest without any warning. The next morning, I confronted her. I'd planned to be calm, rational, to have an adult conversation about what I'd overheard. But the moment I saw her face, the moment I looked into those eyes that had once looked at me with such love, all my composure crumbled. I heard you last night, I said, my voice already breaking. I heard what you said about me to Rebecca. Her face went pale, but not with shame, with anger. Anger that I'd been listening, anger that I'd caught her. You were eavesdropping, she said coldly. That's exactly the kind of behavior I was talking about. Sneaking around, listening to private conversations. Private conversations about me, I screamed. About cutting off my college support. About how I'm a burden and a drama queen, and how you're tired of dealing with me. Lower your voice, she hissed. And maybe if you'd heard that conversation, you'd understand that it's time for you to grow up, to stop expecting everyone else to take care of you. Take care of me? I was sobbing now, great heaving sobs that made it hard to speak. You adopted me. You fought for custody of me. You told me I was your little bird and that you'd always be there for me. You were a child then, she said, and her voice was so cold it felt like ice in my veins. Children need to be taken care of. Adults need to take care of themselves. But I'm not asking you to take care of me forever, I said. I just, I just need your support while I finish college. I just need to know that you still love me, that I still have a family. She was quiet for a long moment, and I held my breath, hoping she'd soften, hoping she'd remember who we used to be to each other. Instead, she said, family is about more than just blood, Sarah. It's about choosing to be kind to each other, choosing to support each other. And lately, you haven't been choosing kindness. Because I don't like Rebecca? Because I'm uncomfortable with the woman who helped destroy my family? Because you're selfish, she said, and each word was like a knife. Because you can't see past your own pain to acknowledge that other people have feelings too. Because you'd rather hold on to old hurts than build new relationships. I stared at her, this woman who had raised me, who had taught me about strength and resilience and love, this woman who was now telling me that my pain didn't matter, that my feelings were selfish, that my struggle to accept my father's mistress meant I didn't deserve her love anymore. Rebecca lost the man she loved too, Grandma continued. She's been grieving too. She's been alone and scared and trying to figure out how to move forward. But instead of having any compassion for her, you've been cold and judgmental and cruel. Cruel? I'd been civil. I'd been polite. I'd choked down dinners and made small talk and tried to coexist with this woman who represented everything painful about my childhood. How was that cruel? She's been nothing but kind to you, Grandma said. She's tried to include you, to care about you, to be there for both of us during a difficult time. And you've repaid that kindness with attitude and resentment. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Rebecca had been kind to me? Rebecca, who had spent years trying to erase me from my father's life, who had succeeded in pushing me out of his world completely, who had stolen whatever chance I might have had for a relationship with him? She had been kind to me? I don't understand, I whispered. I don't understand how you can say these things to me. I don't understand how you can choose her over me. I'm not choosing anyone over anyone, she said. I'm choosing peace over drama. I'm choosing forgiveness over bitterness. I'm choosing to move forward instead of staying stuck in the past. But you were choosing, I wanted to scream. Every time you invited her over, every time you defended her to me, every time you criticized me for being uncomfortable with her presence, you were choosing her. Maybe it would be better if you found somewhere else to stay for a while, she said quietly. Maybe some distance would help you gain some perspective. Those words, they shattered something inside me that I didn't even know could break. My grandmother, my safe place, my home, was asking me to leave. Where am I supposed to go? I asked. You're an adult, she said. Figure it out. I packed my things that day. Not everything, just enough clothes and books to get by for a while. I kept thinking she'd stop me, that she'd realize what she was doing and change her mind. But she didn't. She stayed in her room while I loaded my car, and when I knocked on her door to say goodbye, she didn't answer. I drove back to college in a daze. I moved in with my roommate full-time instead of just during the week. I got a second job to help cover expenses since I couldn't count on Grandma's support anymore. I threw myself into my studies, into work, into anything that would keep me from thinking about how completely alone I was in the world. My mother was still fragile, still working through her own healing process. I couldn't burden her with this. I had a few friends at college. But how do you explain that your grandmother chose your father's mistress over you? How do you make anyone understand that kind of betrayal? For weeks, I heard nothing from Grandma. No calls, no texts, no contact at all. I kept checking my phone, hoping for some sign that she missed me, that she regretted what had happened, that she wanted to work things out. Nothing. Then, about a month after I'd left, I got a call from our neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. She was elderly and had always been close with my grandmother, and she was calling to check on me. "I haven't seen you around lately, dear," she said. "Is everything all right?" I didn't know how to answer that question. Was everything all right? No, nothing was all right. My entire world had collapsed, and I was barely holding on. "I've been staying at college," I said carefully. "Oh, that's nice. And how are you handling everything with your grandmother's new living situation?" New living situation? What was she talking about? "I'm sorry," I said. "What do you mean?" There was a pause. "Oh dear," Mrs. Patterson said. "I thought you knew. Rebecca moved in with your grandmother about 2 weeks ago. She said her lease was up, and it made sense for them to share expenses. They seem very happy together." The phone slipped from my hand and clattered onto the floor. Rebecca was living in my house, in my room probably, in the space that had been my sanctuary, my safe place, my home. I called Mrs. Patterson back and asked her to repeat what she'd said, hoping I'd misunderstood. I hadn't. Rebecca had moved into my grandmother's house. They were living together like some kind of family, the family that I'd been pushed out of, the family that I'd been replaced in. That night, I drove to the house, my house, the house where I'd lived for 6 years, where I'd felt safe and loved and wanted. I parked across the street and watched through the windows. I could see them in the living room, sitting on the couch together, watching TV. They looked comfortable, happy, like this was exactly where they both belonged. Rebecca was wearing one of my old sweatshirts, my Northwestern sweatshirt that I'd left behind when I packed. She was wearing my clothes, living in my house, taking my place in my grandmother's life. I sat in that car for 3 hours, crying until I had no tears left, watching this woman live the life that had been mine, watching my grandmother smile and laugh with her the way she used to smile and laugh with me. When I finally drove away, I made a decision. I was done trying to fix this. I was done hoping for reconciliation. I was done beating myself up for being dramatic or bitter or whatever other labels they wanted to put on my pain. I was going to focus on building my own life, a life where I didn't need anyone who could so easily replace me, a life where I didn't depend on people who could turn on me the moment someone more appealing came along. But the pain was overwhelming. It followed me everywhere. It sat on my chest when I tried to sleep, making it hard to breathe. It whispered in my ear during classes, telling me I was unlovable, unwanted, easy to discard. It made every conversation with new people feel fake, because how could I trust anyone when the person I'd trusted most had betrayed me so completely? I started seeing a therapist at the college counseling center. Dr. Martinez was kind and patient, and she helped me start to process what had happened. She helped me understand that what my grandmother had done wasn't about me being unworthy of love. It was about her own issues, her own capacity for relationship, her own choices. But understanding it intellectually and healing from it emotionally were two very different things. The holidays came and went without any contact from my grandmother. Christmas, which had always been our special time together, passed in silence. I spent it with my roommate's family, feeling like an intruder in their warm, functional relationships. New Year's came and went, then Valentine's Day, then my birthday in March, 20 years old, and the woman who had raised me didn't even remember to call. Or maybe she remembered and chose not to. I kept going to therapy. I kept working. I kept studying. I maintained my grades and my jobs and the facade of being a functional adult. But inside, I was dying. Inside, I was a lost little girl who couldn't understand how love could disappear so completely, so suddenly. Then, in April, I got a call from my mother. She'd been doing better, had been stable for over a year, and we'd started talking regularly again. She was still fragile, but she was working and living independently and rebuilding her life piece by piece. "Sarah," she said, and her voice was strange, shocked. "I just got the most bizarre call." "From who?" "From your grandmother. She said, she wanted to invite me to her wedding." The world stopped spinning. "Her what?" "Her wedding. She's marrying Rebecca next month. She wanted to know if I'd be comfortable attending, since we have history with Rebecca." I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't process what my mother was telling me. My grandmother was marrying Rebecca. My 76-year-old grandmother was marrying my father's 45-year-old former mistress. The woman who had destroyed our family was now going to legally become part of it. "Sarah, are you there?" "Did she—" I had to force the words out. "Did she mention me?" There was a long pause. "She said you two had grown apart, that you'd chosen to distance yourself from the family. She said she'd invited you but didn't expect you to come because you'd made it clear you didn't approve of her choices." She'd invited me? I'd received no invitation, no call, no text, no letter, nothing. She was lying to my mother about me, making it seem like I was the one who had chosen this distance, like I was the one who had rejected her instead of the other way around. "Mom," I said, my voice breaking, "that's not what happened. She chose Rebecca over me. She kicked me out. She replaced me." And then my mother, my broken, damaged mother, who had spent years in therapy learning to be strong again, said something that changed everything for me. "Baby girl," she said, "I know exactly what happened. I know because I lived through Rebecca's manipulation before. I know because I see the pattern. And I know because your grandmother called me 3 months ago, crying, asking if I thought she'd made a mistake." My heart stopped. "What?" "She regrets it, Sarah. She regrets choosing Rebecca over you. But she's in too deep now, and Rebecca has convinced her that reaching out to you would be admitting she was wrong. Rebecca has isolated her from everyone who might question their relationship. Rebecca has made herself indispensable." "But the wedding?" "Rebecca's idea. Rebecca's pushing for it. Your grandmother is scared and alone and being manipulated by someone who's very good at manipulation. But that doesn't excuse what she did to you, and it doesn't mean you have to forgive her." After I hung up with my mother, I sat in my dorm room and stared at the wall for hours. My grandmother regretted it. She knew she'd made a mistake, but instead of fixing it, instead of reaching out to me, she was doubling down. She was marrying the woman she'd chosen over me. That's when I realized something. My grandmother wasn't the victim here. She was a willing participant in her own manipulation. She was choosing the easy path, the path where she didn't have to admit she'd been wrong, where she didn't have to face what she'd done to me. She was choosing Rebecca again, still choosing Rebecca over me. And that's when the anger really hit me. Not the hurt, not the sadness, but pure, burning rage. How dare she? How dare she destroy my life, push me away, replace me with the woman who had tormented my family, and then act like I was the one who had chosen this distance? How dare she lie to my mother about what had happened? How dare she play the victim when she was the one who had wielded all the power in our relationship? I didn't go to the wedding. I didn't even acknowledge the invitation that never came. But I did something else. I started documenting everything, every conversation we'd had, every cruel thing she'd said to me, every way she'd prioritized Rebecca's feelings over mine. I wrote it all down, dated it, organized it. I gathered text messages and voicemails and emails. I built a comprehensive record of exactly how our relationship had deteriorated and who had caused that deterioration. Then I started reaching out to our extended family, cousins, aunts, uncles, family friends, people who had known me since I was a child, who had watched my grandmother raise me, who might be curious about why I wasn't at her wedding. I told them the truth, not my version of the truth, not an emotional biased account, but the facts, the timeline, the conversations, the way she'd invited my father's mistress into our home and then made me feel unwelcome there, the way she'd criticized me for having feelings about my traumatic childhood, the way she'd chosen a new relationship over her granddaughter. I wasn't dramatic about it. I wasn't crying or begging for sympathy. I was calm and factual and detailed. And you know what? They believed me because they knew me. They knew what kind of person I was, and they knew what kind of person Rebecca was. Word got back to my grandmother, of course. Word always gets back. About 2 weeks after her wedding, I got a text from her. The first communication I'd received in over 6 months. I heard you've been spreading lies about me to the family. This is exactly the kind of behavior I was talking about. You need to stop this immediately. I stared at that text for a long time. Even now, even after everything, she was trying to make me the villain. She was trying to gaslight me into believing that telling the truth about what had happened was somehow wrong. I texted back, I haven't told anyone anything that isn't true. If you don't like how the truth sounds, maybe you should examine your choices. She didn't respond, but the family did. I started getting calls from people who wanted to understand what had happened, who were shocked by what they'd heard, who couldn't believe that the woman they'd known and respected for decades could treat her granddaughter so cruelly. My great-aunt Linda called me crying. I had no idea, she said. I knew something was wrong when you weren't at the wedding, but she made it sound like you were just being stubborn. I had no idea she'd kicked you out of your home. My cousin Marcus, who was my age and had grown up seeing me and Grandma together at family gatherings, was furious. This is insane, he said. She used to talk about you like you were the most important thing in her world. What the hell happened to her? What had happened was Rebecca. Rebecca had happened. Rebecca had slowly, methodically isolated my grandmother from anyone who might question their relationship. Rebecca had convinced her that I was the problem, that my discomfort with the situation was unreasonable and selfish. Rebecca had made herself indispensable while making me seem dispensable, and my grandmother had let it happen. More than that, she'd participated in it. She'd chosen it. The family fallout was significant. People started declining invitations to gatherings where Rebecca would be present. People started asking uncomfortable questions about why a 76-year-old woman was married to a 45-year-old woman who had once been her son's mistress. People started treating my grandmother differently, and she didn't like it, which is when the calls started. First, it was other family members trying to mediate. Maybe you should reach out to her, they'd say. Maybe you should try to work things out. Family is family. But I was done with that mentality. Family isn't family when family treats you like garbage. Blood doesn't excuse cruelty. Love isn't love when it's conditional on accepting unacceptable behavior. Then, about 3 months after the wedding, my grandmother called me directly. I was at work when my phone rang, and seeing her name on the screen made my hands shake. I almost didn't answer, but I did. Sarah? Her voice sounded small, uncertain, nothing like the cold, critical tone she'd used the last time we'd spoken. What do you want? I asked. I I miss you. I miss talking to you. I miss having you in my life. The words I'd been waiting to hear for almost a year. But they felt hollow, too little too late. You made your choice, I said. You chose Rebecca over me. You chose your new life over our relationship. It wasn't like that, she said, and I could hear her starting to cry. I was confused. I was grieving. I made mistakes. You didn't make mistakes, I said, and my voice was steady now, calm. You made choices. You chose to invite my father's mistress into our home. You chose to prioritize her feelings over mine. You chose to criticize me for having normal reactions to an abnormal situation. You chose to kick me out rather than support me. You chose to marry her instead of trying to repair our relationship. I thought I thought you'd understand eventually. I thought you'd come around. You thought I'd fall in line, I corrected. You thought I'd accept whatever you decided, no matter how it affected me. You thought my love for you meant I'd tolerate anything. There was a long silence. Then she said, "Can we try again? Can we start over?" And that's when I realized something important. She wasn't apologizing. She wasn't acknowledging what she'd done wrong. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was asking me to pretend it had never happened. She was asking me to come back and accept the same situation that had driven me away in the first place. Are you still married to Rebecca? I asked. Another silence. Yes. Is she still living in our house? It's her house too now. Then no, we can't start over, because you haven't actually changed anything. You just miss having me around to make you feel better about your choices. That's not true, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. It is true. You want me to come back and play happy family with the woman who helped destroy my childhood. You want me to pretend that what you did was okay, that pushing me out of my home was justified, that lying about me to other family members was acceptable. You want me to make you feel less guilty without you having to actually address what you did wrong. I could hear her crying harder now. I love you, she said. I've always loved you. No, I said, and it felt good to say it. It felt powerful and final and right. You loved me when it was convenient. You loved me when I was a child who needed you and made you feel important. But the moment I had feelings and opinions that conflicted with what you wanted, the moment I couldn't just smile and go along with your choices, that love disappeared. It didn't disappear, she whispered. Yes, it did. Real love doesn't vanish the moment someone disagrees with you. Real love doesn't prioritize a new relationship over a lifelong bond. Real love doesn't make someone choose between their feelings and their family. I hung up on her. She called back 3 times. I didn't answer. Then the texts started. Long, rambling messages about how much she missed me, how sorry she was, how she wanted to fix things. But none of them contained the words I needed to hear. None of them said, I was wrong to choose Rebecca over you. None of them said, I understand why you're hurt and your feelings are valid. None of them said, I will prioritize our relationship over my marriage. Because she wouldn't. Even now, even missing me, even regretting her choices, she wouldn't actually change them. She wanted me back, but only on her terms. Only if I would accept the unacceptable. So I blocked her number. The peace that followed was strange at first. For so many months, I'd been hoping for her to reach out, hoping for reconciliation, hoping for her to choose me. And when she finally did reach out, When she finally expressed regret, I realized that what she was offering wasn't enough. I didn't want to be tolerated in her life. I didn't want to be fit into the spaces that Rebecca left available. I didn't want to pretend that what had happened was okay, just to maintain some semblance of a relationship. I wanted to be chosen. I wanted to be prioritized. I wanted to matter enough for her to make real changes, real sacrifices, real acknowledgments of wrongdoing. And since she couldn't or wouldn't do that, I chose myself instead. I finished college with honors. I got accepted into graduate school for psychology, inspired by my own therapy experience and wanting to help other people navigate family trauma. I built relationships with friends who valued me, who wouldn't discard me the moment someone more interesting came along. I stayed in contact with the family members who had supported me during the fallout. I rebuilt my relationship with my mother, who was continuing to heal and grow stronger. I created a life that didn't revolve around gaining approval from someone who had proven herself incapable of giving it consistently. And for 2 years, I heard nothing from my grandmother. Then, last week, she called. Not my blocked number. She called from Rebecca's phone, knowing I wouldn't recognize it. Sarah? Her voice was different, older, frailer. Please don't hang up. I almost did anyway, but something in her tone stopped me. What do you want? I asked. I need to tell you something, she said. Rebecca left me. I felt a cold satisfaction at those words. Not happiness exactly, but a sense of justice. The woman who had broken up my family, who had isolated my grandmother from everyone who loved her, who had convinced her to abandon her granddaughter, had abandoned her in return. She took half of everything, Grandma continued. The house, the savings, everything. She said she'd never loved me, that she'd just been looking for security after your father died. She said I was pathetic for thinking someone like her could actually care about someone like me. The irony was almost too much to bear. My grandmother had thrown away our relationship for a woman who had been using her all along. She'd chosen manipulation over genuine love, and now she was paying the price. I'm sorry that happened to you, I said, and I meant it. I didn't wish that kind of cruelty on anyone, even her. I was wrong, she said then, and those were the words I'd been waiting to hear for 3 years. I was wrong about everything. I was wrong to choose her over you. I was wrong to push you away. I was wrong to believe her when she said you were the problem. It should have felt like victory. It should have felt like vindication. Instead, it just felt sad. I know you were wrong, I said quietly. Can you ever forgive me? She asked. Can we try again? And that's when I realized that it was too late. Not too late for forgiveness. I'd already forgiven her, for my own peace of mind. But too late for reconciliation. Too late to go back to what we'd been. Because here's what I'd learned in therapy, what I'd learned through building my own life, what I'd learned through 3 years of grieving the loss of the most important relationship in my world. Some betrayals change you permanently. Some wounds heal, but they leave scars that affect how you move through the world forever. I could forgive my grandmother for choosing Rebecca over me. I could understand that she'd been manipulated, that she'd been lonely, that she'd made mistakes, but I couldn't trust her again. I couldn't go back to depending on someone who had proven that their love for me was conditional, temporary, subject to change based on who else was in their life. I forgive you, I told her, but that doesn't mean we can go back to the way things were. Why not? She asked, and she sounded genuinely confused. Because you showed me who you really are, I said. You showed me that your love for me wasn't strong enough to withstand pressure from someone else. You showed me that I was disposable to you, and I can't unknow that. I was confused, she said. I was being manipulated. You were, I agreed. But you were also making choices. You chose to listen to Rebecca instead of listening to me. You chose to believe her when she said I was dramatic and entitled. You chose to push me away instead of setting boundaries with her. You chose to prioritize her comfort over mine every single time. I know, she whispered. I know I did. But I want to make it right. You can't make it right, I said. You can't undo 3 years of abandonment. You can't undo the damage of choosing someone else over me. You can't undo the pain of making me feel like I was unworthy of love. She was crying again, but this time her tears didn't move me the way they once would have. So, what does that mean? She asked. It means I wish you well, I said. It means I hope you learned something from this experience. It means I hope you're more careful about who you trust in the future, but it doesn't mean I'm coming back. But you're all I have left, she said, and there was something almost desperate in her voice. No, I said firmly, I'm not all you have left. You have other family members who are willing to forgive you if you show real change. You have the opportunity to rebuild relationships with people you pushed away. You have the chance to create a new life based on better choices. But I want you, she said. You had me, I replied. You had my complete love and devotion and loyalty. You had a granddaughter who would have done anything for you, who trusted you completely, who saw you as the most important person in her world. And you gave that up. You traded it for something that turned out to be worthless. The silence stretched between us for a long time. I understand, she finally said. I understand that I ruined everything. You did, I said. But understanding it and living with the consequences are two different things. Will you ever be able to love me again? The question broke my heart because the answer was complicated. Did I love her? Yes, in the way you love someone who shaped you, who gave you important things, who was once central to your world. But did I love her in the way I once had, with complete trust and devotion? No. That part of me was gone forever. I will always love the grandmother who raised me, I said, the woman who fought for custody of me, who made me pancakes on Sunday mornings, who called me her little bird. I will always be grateful for what she gave me during those years. But that woman chose to disappear. She chose to become someone else, someone who could discard me for a woman who was using her. And I can't love someone who doesn't exist anymore. After I hung up, I sat in my apartment and cried. Not for what I'd lost. I'd already grieved that. But for what could have been. For the relationship we might have maintained if she'd made different choices. For the grandmother who might have been at my graduate school graduation, who might have been there for future milestones, who might have been part of the family I hope to build someday. But some things can't be recovered once they're broken. Some trust, once shattered, can't be rebuilt. Some love, once betrayed, can't be restored to its original form. My grandmother chose Rebecca over me when Rebecca was offering her something she wanted. She chose me back when Rebecca was gone and she was alone. But love isn't about choosing someone when they're your only option. Love is about choosing someone even when you have other options. Love is about prioritizing someone even when it's difficult, even when it requires sacrifice, even when other people are pressuring you to choose differently. My grandmother failed that test, and while I can forgive her for failing it, I can't pretend that she didn't fail it. So I'm building my life without her. I'm building relationships with people who choose me consistently, who value me for who I am, who wouldn't discard me for someone more convenient. I'm learning to trust again, carefully and gradually, with people who earn that trust through their actions over time, And sometimes, when I'm making pancakes on a Sunday morning in my own kitchen, I remember being 7 years old and standing next to a woman who called me her little bird. I remember feeling safe and loved and wanted. I remember believing that some bonds were unbreakable. I don't regret having those memories. They taught me what love could feel like, what family should be, what I deserve in relationships. They gave me a template for the kind of love I want to give and receive. But I also don't regret walking away when that love proved to be conditional. I don't regret choosing my own peace over someone else's comfort. I don't regret refusing to accept crumbs of affection from someone who had once given me the whole meal. Because here's what I learned. Sometimes the people who hurt us most are the people who once loved us best. Sometimes the deepest betrayals come from the safest places. Sometimes the people who saved us are the same people who destroy us. And when that happens, when someone shows you that their love has limits and conditions and expiration dates, the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to believe them. The strongest thing you can do is to walk away. The wisest thing you can do is to build a life that doesn't depend on their approval or affection. My name is Sarah. I'm 22 years old. And the day I found out my grandmother chose my father's mistress over me, my heart broke in a way I never thought possible. But it also opened in a way I never expected. It opened to the possibility of loving myself enough to demand better. It opened to the possibility of building relationships based on mutual respect and consistent care. It opened to the possibility of being okay, even when the people I thought would always love me prove that their love has conditions. Sometimes revenge isn't about getting even. Sometimes it's about walking away stronger. Sometimes it's about building a life so beautiful and fulfilling that their absence from it becomes irrelevant. Sometimes it's about becoming the kind of person who would never do to someone else what they did to you. Sometimes revenge is simply refusing to let their betrayal make you smaller, meaner, more closed off than you were before. Sometimes it's about proving that their inability to love you consistently says nothing about your worthiness of love and everything about their capacity for it. My grandmother called me last week crying, asking for another chance. But some apologies come too late. Some betrayals cut too deep. Some choices have consequences that can't be undone, no matter how much regret follows them. I wished her well, and I meant it. But I also wished her goodbye, and I meant that too. Because I finally learned the difference between loving someone and accepting unacceptable treatment from them. I finally learned that you can forgive someone without trusting them again, that you can wish someone well without welcoming them back into your life, that you can honor what someone once meant to you without allowing them to hurt you again. And that knowledge, that hard-won wisdom, that strength I found in the ashes of the most important relationship of my life, that's worth more than any apology she could ever offer. If this story touched you, if it made you think about the relationships in your own life, if it helped you understand that you deserve consistent love and care, then maybe something good came from all this pain. Maybe my grandmother's betrayal, as devastating as it was, led me to exactly where I needed to be. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the thing that saves you. Sometimes the people who break you open are the people who teach you how to put yourself back together stronger than before. Sometimes losing everything is the first step toward finding yourself. And sometimes, when someone shows you who they really are, the kindest thing you can do for both of you is to believe them and walk away. Hit that like button if this story resonated with you. Subscribe if you want to hear more about learning to choose yourself even when it's hard. And comment below to let me know where you're watching from, because sometimes knowing you're not alone in your pain is the first step toward healing from it. Sometimes revenge isn't about getting even. Sometimes it's about finally walking away stronger.